In LA, and I am delighted to be speaking with an extremely talented person, a Canadian. This is Stan Daniels. Hello.
Hi, Sylvia.
You're very well known for music, right?
Yes,
Both on stage and TV. You wrote a lot of
yes,
stuff. Are you a director as well, a producer? What do you
yes.
do?
What do I do? Well, I have done quite a bit of directing since I stopped doing situation comedies. Being in the trenches, I'm still involved
Right.
in pilots and things, such things. But I mean, basically, what I've been here as a writer. I was doing comedy on the Dean Martin show for 6 years, which is why I came down here, and then after that I moved into situation comedy and did the Mary Tyler Moore show,
Oh,
produced and wrote that, and then was one of the creators and executive producers and writers of Taxi. And after that, I kind of stopped, as I say, going into the trenches.
right.
Uh, Tried to get back to musical theater, which is my main love. And I still did a few things. I was directing, even though I wasn't writing, I was directing a number of sitcoms. And I created a show by myself called Rock, which ran, it was a black
Oh, yes.
comedy, which ran for 3 years here. And at the moment, I'm involved in some animated things, again, writing and producing
With a
and
voiceover?
yeah, voiceover animation things
Right.
with a Canadian company that's doing the
Oh.
Nelvana and a few things. I have three of them are going to be made into a movie and shown on the network Showtime here.
Yes, I know
And
that.
then I'm acting as consultant on another series. And anyway, that's me
That
at the
sounds
moment.
so exciting. And the shows you mentioned, I'm familiar with a lot. They're great.
Thank you.
When did it all start, your career, and where?
Well, it started in Toronto. I think I was 16 years old. Uh, a man called Hy Bosson, who
Oh,
was a very close friend of my father.
yes.
Um, Hy introduced me to Jack Arthur when I was 16. And the very first thing, and I wrote a song for, it was the first year or the second, I think it was the first year he was doing the CNE show, Jack
Yes.
the Spectacular. And I wrote, the very first song I wrote when I was 16, it was just about a minute and a half piece, but it was performed on that CNE stage by about 150 people on stage singing in a chorus line. And an
Wonderful.
orchestra, Howard Cable's orchestra of I don't know, 100. And I just remember as a kid, I got it. I
Oh,
would stand by the stage every night and just watch them
oh yes.
do that song. It's been downhill ever since. I mean, in terms of
Yes.
that, and that
I,
was the first. And then I wrote other songs in later years again for the CNE show for songs. For a few years, and also through Mava. I think I was about 19 or 20 when I first played for Mava Moore,
mm-hmm.
and had a song. The first day he wanted to do a song of mine that Barbara Hamilton sang in Spring Thaw,
Mm-hmm.
and then I started writing a number of things for Spring Thaw and wrote for television in Toronto. Norman Jewison was doing the Big Review, which was the first
Mm-hmm.
major musical thing on television, and I wrote a couple of songs for that, and uh, and that pretty well took me up to the end of my college days. I think I went to England. I was studying philosophy at the
Mm-hmm.
U of T, and I got a BA and an MA there, and I got a scholarship to go to Oxford to do grad work, Canadian
Uh-huh.
government scholarship to do graduate work. I went to Magdalen there, and while I was there at Oxford, I did some things. I was in an Oxford review, and then they asked me to do the Oxford to write and direct the review that Oxford put on, a late night review at the Edinburgh Festival. And I did that, and it was quite successful. I found Alan Bennett was in that, who I
Really?
found, and Dudley Moore, with whom I had sung one of my songs, an Old Spring Thaw song we sang at the Oxford. He did the orchestrations. He couldn't be in it because he was doing something else at the festival, but he did the orchestrations for me, and it was. And I had accepted a job at Carleton University teaching philosophy. I was supposed to come back. I was doing a doctorate and I realized that I had no aptitude for teaching whatsoever. I was miserable thinking of it, and I had to write Carleton and ask them if they'd forgive me if I turned down the offer, and which I did. And then I worked in London for a little while in reviews and things, and then I'll just go on with it. I came back to Canada in 1962, and I again started working with Maver again, who was and did work for Norman Campbell, did a number of shows with Norman, and for Patty Sampson did some shows. It was great for me. I had a wonderful life at that time because I think I was the last Canadian writer left.
Oh, so you were busy.
Everybody else, so I had my pick. I was writing for Wayne and Schuster. I was writing musical things for them, and then occasional other things as well. But basically, the opening numbers and.
Yes, I was going to ask you if you wrote for Wayne and Schuster, because that's my old stamping ground.
Sure,
you know?
sure, yeah.
Yes. Did you always work alone?
No, I worked, even before I left for Oxford, I was writing with Ray Jessel.
I know, this is why I asked you.
Yes, and in fact, I forgot, before we did a musical for Norman Campbell, before I left for Oxford, a caveman musical it was. And it was shown. I wasn't there when it was shown. I was already in England by the time it got on, and we're still good friends, Ray and I.
Norman?
Norman too, of course. Yes, we see Norman whenever I'm back there.
I speak to him regularly.
We'll give him my love.
I will, absolutely.
And Elaine, of course. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and so I was back in Toronto and was having my work doing those things, and also I was on. I got a strange phone call from a lovely woman called Beryl Fox, who I understand I just found out recently that she had died, Beryl, and she remembered me from a party, and apparently Ray and I had kind of sung songs, and she just asked me if I'd be interested in writing bits for This Hour Has 7 Days.
Oh.
And I wrote one, it was one based on a Quebec scandal going on at the La Montagne at the time, and I wrote something on that, and they liked that. And then they asked me to call if I had any other ideas, so I did, and I did something, there was an item in the paper about songs in China, the Chinese hit parade in Red China at the time. And I wrote a thing for a Chinese songwriter, who was talking about all this big, who that guy, who that boy in Hanoi, Yankee bomb cannot destroy that a favorite comrade, Ho Chi Minh, Ho Chi Minh, Ho Chi Minh, telling about how they sold billions of, never mind platinum, they would sell by the billions, and they couldn't find anybody to do it, who could do it, who could play it and sing it. So they brought me in and asked me if I'd try doing it, and I got all made up, and I did that, and from then on, I would write and perform live. That was done on film, but I would live television, and I would write based on whatever was happening that week. I'd write a satirical sketch, and I'd go out and perform it, and that was great fun.
Did you prefer live television to taped?
Did I prefer it? You mean as a writer or as an?
Well, not as a writer. I don't think you would. You'd want it more perfect. But as a performer.
As a performer, it was great
Yes,
great
absolutely.
fun. And it was and in fact, it was interesting on Rock, the series that I created. I wasn't associated actually with the dated. I had a wonderful job called consultant, which I recommend to anybody. I just stayed home and made notes
Right.
and spoke to them over the phone, and that was. But the third year of Rock, they decided, because the actors were all stage actors, and they said, let's do it live. And they actually did a sitcom live. It was taped, and it was amazing they did how well they did it.
Well, that's how we started in Toronto,
Oh, I
if you
know,
remember. It was
I know.
live, and it was exciting because it was always an opening
Oh, yeah,
night.
it was great. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And then on tape, you just didn't
You lose
have
you
the,
lose
you know,
something
the
of it.
wonderful feeling, that,
Sure,
all
yeah.
that tingle.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so
And that was what I was doing at that time. Why those years in Toronto were so great for me. I was in New York, and somebody had me play for Frank Lesser, and he became my publisher and my mentor, and treated me like a son. I mean, he would bring me from Toronto to New York and put me up at a hotel, and I would get best seats to whatever the top plays were, and give me great dinners. Milt Kramer, who was his head of his publishing, who would take me out for these fabulous dinners. So I was going back and forth. What he was doing, he had me prepare a what he called a trunk. I was writing a lot of songs to demonstrate, and then when it was ready after a year or so, he had me play for his peers and his friends and his colleagues, which I did, and had some very interesting experiences, and some of which turned out sadly, and some turned out very nicely. The very first people I played for were Cy Feuer and Bob Fosse. And played, and Fosse apparently was very impressed, and he asked me the next night to play for Gwen Verdon, his wife.
yes.
And what he wanted to do, then they asked me to do this show that they wanted to do. At the time, what it was two one-act musicals. One was based on Knights of Cabiria. Fosse had done the book himself. And the other was a play by Elaine May. And I read them both, and I loved the Knights of Cabiria thing. It was just, even though it was one act. And I couldn't see anything in the Elaine May. I mean, it was very funny,
Yes.
but I couldn't find a song in it. And so I asked Frank, bless her, what to do. And he said, you just got to tell him how you feel about it. And so I told him that, and I didn't know how to do it. Of course, that eventually became Sweet Charity, with a wonderful score. It turned into Sweet, with Neil Simon redid the book, and it became a full-length thing. So that kind of thing was.
That was a lovely show.
Oh, it was a wonderful show and a wonderful score, and another close. I had a lot of close calls. I had Herman Levin, who produced My Fair Lady, wanted to do a musical of The Baker's Wife, the French film, and he had heard of me through Joseph Stein, who I had played for, and the idea of Joe Stein was going to write the book, and Burton Lane was going to write the music, and I would do the lyrics. And then when he went to negotiate for the rights, he went to, was it René Clair was the director? I'm not sure who it was. I may have the director's name. Directed the film, but in any case, he went to him and said, "And this will be the royalty." And René Clair said, "That sounds fine." The movie was based on a play, and he said, "Fine. Of that, I will get 70%, and the author of the play can have 30%." And well, all right. Then he went to see the author of the play and told him the same thing, and the author of the play said, "Yes, that sounds fine, except I will have 70%, and the director can have 30%. What he did was, he said, "All right, gentlemen, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to raise the royalty. You will each have the equivalent of 70%. And each of them said, "No, whatever the fee is, I will get 70% of the new royalty." And so that didn't come to pass that way. And I finally did eventually do a show in 1976. It was called So Long 174th Street, again through Joe Stein. Bobby Moore starred in it, based on a novel by Carl Reiner, and the show had a disastrous opening night. It had some very good reviews from anybody who did, the critics that didn't see it on opening night. It had a disastrous opening night and closed after 2 weeks. Strangely enough, this past year, somebody wanted to did a concert version of it in New York, with just reading with the scripts and minimal staging, and it was immensely successful, and somebody at the moment wants to do an off-Broadway production of it, so that's very nice.
Would you be involved with any of that?
Oh, of course.
Great.
Sure, the composer is always
okay,
is
then.
always. Anyway, that was my time in Canada, and as I say, I was having a really good time. Then one day, I was sitting in the outer office of the publisher, and there was another man sitting there. And I could have been the janitor. He just looked at me and he said, "You look like a writer. Do you want to come to California?" And I kind of laughed at it. As it happens, I was very busy at the time and was working in Toronto. There was a number of projects that I was doing there at the time, and so thought no more about it. 3 months later, same guy was sitting in the outer office, and I was sitting in the same outer office. And he said to me, first words to me were, "Well, are you coming or not?" Who he was a man called Greg Garrison, who was the director, producer of the Dean Martin show. And he asked me to come down. He was doing the first Dean Martin summer show. He asked me to come down for 3 weeks and work on that. And I did for 3 weeks, and 3 weeks turned into 35 years, I guess, or 30, no, just 30 years now. 30 years is what that turned into, and I did 8 years on the Dean Martin show, and then my friend who I'd met on that, a man called Ed Weinberger, we became friends. I did 6 years. He was fired after the first year, along with somehow I survived. I found the way that you had to write spots to survive and get around the head writer and go right to the producer, which I did. And I did 6 years. And then this man, Ed Weinberger, asked me if I'd have to produce the Mary Tyler Moore show and write with him and do that, which I did, and then did 3 years on that, and then we formed a group with Jim Brooks and Alan Burns and Ed and myself, and out of that came Taxi.
Great shows. They're all great shows that you've mentioned.
Yeah, and as I say, I stopped. Did I tell you that I stopped doing
Yes.
situation comedies, and I directed. I started directing sitcoms after that, but what I was doing mainly at the time, I decided to stop because I wanted to have another shot at musical theater. And I did one show all by myself, and did a couple with Bernard Slade.
Oh, an old friend of mine.
Is he? Yes.
Yes.
Oh, you should call him.
I interviewed him last
you've done
year,
it. Oh, you
and
did.
his wife Jill.
And Jill as well. Yes. They both were very close to them. And I did 2 musicals with them, one of which was a musical of same time next year. We did that, which
Which
had its world premiere slightly out of town in Budapest, Hungary, on New Year's Eve, 1995. And they did a wonderful production of it. The director, it was just delightful. It had a very scary. I'll tell you the story. It had a very scary opening night. These 2 very famous Hungarian actors were playing the parts, and they were both terrific in it. The girl was basically an actress, had not sung, certainly had not danced, but she sang very well, and they rehearsed for 6 months. She had, as I say, had never danced before. And then I was there for the week of previews, and they would have a rehearsal, or they have a performance for free performance for old folks that would come
Oh, yes.
in the morning, and then they would have a rehearsal, and so opening night, and so she was working very hard. Opening night was a gala occasion. They'd never put on an American or Western musical. I mean, they had done things like Cats and Cabaret, other shows, but these had already been created and done, so they basically
Yes.
just restaged them. The orchestrations had been made and everything. They would translate them and do them. This was a world premiere, and so it was a really big deal. I went down 6 months before, and I was like a huge celebrity. My picture was in the papers, and I was interviewed on Hungarian television. It was quite. So the opening night, there were going to be 2 opening nights that had to be turned into. The New Year's Eve one was going to be for all the people that had spent money and bought seats in this new, this refurbished theater with their names on it, and so but then there was going to be another opening night the night before, which I guess December 30th. And this was a gala event. All the diplomatic corps were there. People from the Hungarian government were there. All of the theatrical stars. It was a glittering audience. So Bern and Jill and my wife Aileen and I, who you may know, Aileen Kamens, I don't know what was her name as a professional. We went to the theater from the hotel, and it was supposed to start at 7 o'clock. 6:45, there's this lady who was the press relations lady, and she spoke very good English. She'd been over in the States, and she called me aside and told me, something's wrong with Dotya's leg. That's the star, the female star. We don't know whether she can go on or not yet. And so the audience stayed outside, 7 o'clock, 7:15. Finally, there's an announcer, please, the announcement rather, saying, please, will you all come and take your seats? So everybody comes and takes the seats, this audience. And on the stage come the director, the male star, and the artistic director of the theater, and have an announcement to make. And unfortunately, Dotya cannot go on. Dorothea could not go on that evening. She just can't stand. She feels terrible about it. And as they're making this announcement from the middle of the stalls of the downstairs, there's a loud wail, woman wailing at the top of her voice. It turns out that it was the star's mother, also a very famous accent, and she was wailing as this announcement. So I went back to see it. But of course we were all terrified, and the company was terrified. They had a huge investment in this show, and it could have totally been canceled. I went back to see Dotya in her dressing room, and she was bawling. But they took her to the hospital and did acupuncture and stuff on her. And somehow they simplified the choreography, and she was able to go on the next night. So we did have that opening night performance, and it was just terrific. They had done a wonderful sensitive. The director was extremely talented and did a very. Bern and I were both thrilled with it, and it was a composer's dream. I mean, afterwards, they're stamping like this kind of applause, European style. Then we went up and made speeches on the stage, and it was. But it was a great experience.
What language did they sing in?
In Hungarian. When I went in 6 months before, I met with the translator, and it was a loose translation, but he must have done a great job. I just listened to see it, and you could tell by where the laughs came that he'd done a very fine job, and the musical director did a great. But both lyrics, and it's a terrible language to have to translate. I have no idea how he could do it. It's the only language of its kind in the world. It has a vague relationship to ancient Finnish. Apparently,
I've heard that.
And there are long words. Every word has to be accented on the first syllable, which is enormously, and there are very few one syllable words. I mean, and like thank you is Viszontlátásra. So if you're a translator, you can imagine trying to translate that.
What about lyrics? That would be
that's what I'm saying.
impossible.
But he somehow did it, and he must have done a great job because he did,
Right, because in English,
yes, I know.
you right to a point,
Oh, of
not at the
course.
beginning of the
No,
phrase.
no, of course, and you have feminine rhymes and triple
Right.
rhymes. But he did it just, I could tell, I could hear, I got used to the man with thought.
You've got to write all this in a book. 'Cause,
I can't write prose. If I could, I'd have been a novelist. I just write dialogue. When I write something, it's
Yeah.
in its minimal stage directions. She enters and sits. That's it. I don't say anything about the room.
Good enough.
That's all. I can't.
Right.
Describing things, I'm terrible at. So I would never write it in a novel or
But everything
prose.
you've told me is so exciting, It would read beautifully that
Right,
this
if I could
happened
write
and
it.
that happened. I
Right,
think
if I could put it into words.
have a stab at it.
Okay.
It's good. Tell me, what have you done that gave you the most pleasure?
The most, there were a number of individual episodes of Taxi and Mary Tyler Moore that were closely associated.
Yes.
I remember the Chuckle Show when we did that. I was very proud of that and the way that it happened. And I guess my two nicest nights in, I thought with Wayne Schuster we did a show at Charlottetown for the together, and I did
Yes.
a lot of time, and that was very good. I was very pleased to have done that. That was
I
that
think
was very.
Corinne Conley
Corinne was
there.
in
I
it.
remember
Yes,
that,
she did. I wrote a couple of songs. She did a couple of songs that I wrote in it, and this night in Hungary was one of the thrills of my life, and this concert version in New York.
Yes.
The opening night of that, hearing it performed, hearing that this other show along 174th Street done was a huge thrill for me. So I mean, they would be among my
That would make you
professional
happy.
memories. Yeah.
Yes. What are you most proud of?
Again, it's a work that will never get done anywhere. It would be the one of the shows that when I sat down to write some musicals after Taxi. It's a comic opera. It's about women's liberation in tennis, which is another
Oh, yes.
called Damn You, Billie Jean. It's a name, but it's an immense work. It's probably would take 3.5 hours or something if anybody ever tried to stage it. It'd be immensely complicated, and I'm very proud of that score. And of that, I wrote the book as well to that. And
But do you think it has a chance? Can it be done?
it would be very difficult. I don't know who would do it, and I just don't know.
Trying to think.
I do mean to come up to Canada. Somebody just approached me actually recently about doing a. Oh darn, I can't remember his name. Names are bad. But he wants to do a review based on people who have turned 50. For an old and the problems
Oh, yes.
and the problems of that, and he's a he's a lovely man, and gosh, the name just
A Canadian?
Yes, but he's from somewhere else. His name, he may be German, or Austrian or something. And I want to spend some time in Canada, and I would love to get something. Bryn and I have spoken about trying to get something done in Canada, either in Charlottetown or in
Yes.
Toronto or something like that, a musical. So.
Or Stratford or
or
Niagara on the Lake?
Well, no, I do want to get something done at Stratford.
Yes.
It's something. When I returned from Oxford, I did a musical based on Misanthrope that Norman Campbell produced, and it's something that I think could be done at Stratford, and so
Oh, yes.
I
that
want to go
would be-
back there and exploit my Canadianism.
Well, there's always room for genius,
Well,
talent. No, they're always open for that. You know that. Television in Canada is starting to come back now. There are
Oh,
a
is it? I
couple of
hadn't-
series that
great. Oh, I
got
know. I've seen a
going,
few of
and,
them have been shown here, and they've been terrific. The ones that I've
Yes,
seen.
there's some good work being done because it really hit a low. Nothing was going on. Nothing was being done. Just imports. And there's a lot of talent up there.
No,
so.
I enjoy. I've a few things that I've done have been done in Canada. I did a mini-series of about a television evangelist, which was done in Toronto, and I've done a series for Showtime here based on Kurt Vonnegut's stories. And they did 6 of them, did 3 a night, and I ended up doing 3 of them. Another Canadian company did them, and I got up to actually we shot it to direct one of them myself in Calgary, and then we edited it in Vancouver, and that was a big kick for me.
Yeah, there are a lot of locations in Canada that are really beautiful. That are exactly right.
Yeah. No, I directed a Western in Vancouver. That's what I was doing when you tried to get me last year.
Oh, yes.
I was doing, it was a show called Dead Man's Gun, which was done in Vancouver, and I directed an episode of it, which was great fun, too.
Good.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would have liked to do, but it just didn't happen?
So far, musical theater.
Yes.
And I'm still going to try.
Yes.
I'm still trying. Still
Well, that's your great love, isn't it?
Yes.
That's what you want to do. Tell me, did you ever have, I don't think you did, but did you ever have to take a civilian job to support your career?
No.
Good.
No, I
Good.
never had to do that. I mean, I considered it when I came back from England.
The
At that
teaching.
point. I was looking for anything at that point, and then made contact with Maver again, who I edited Spring Thaw, and I did a radio review with him of something, and so he was a huge help to me in my career, Maver, as was Norman.
Right. Well, some of us are very lucky.
Yes.
You don't have to drive a cab or
No, I haven't.
wait on tables.
No.
That's good. That's great. Did you ever work with a producer or director doing your work? Someone you just didn't agree with? What do you do about that?
Well, here, basically, when you're doing, I was a writer-producer or a writer-executive producer.
So it's your own.
So you're really in charge. And the director of a sitcom is, I mean, they can be very talented. Jay Sandrich, who did Mary, was a wonderful director. But you go down to the stage and the actors perform the show for you. And because you have to know if something's wrong, you have to know whether it's the performance that's wrong or the words. So you have to speak directly to which you can never do in the stage or in a movie. The writer has no right at all. You have to tell them, try it this way, and then you see if it works that way. And if it works that way, fine. If not, then you have to rewrite it. Because of it has to be done in a hurry, you have to really override the director. You restage it or you do something. And so there will, but that's never a particular director that, I said, oh God, this guy's driving me nuts or something. You just don't hire him again if he doesn't do
Exactly. My thoughts went right into your head.
And
because you don't want to work with somebody who simply is incompetent and can't interpret what you've written.
Yeah.
But of course, if you're a producer, that you do have the final word, don't you?
Yeah, the executive producer.
You've never had to work with a director you just didn't like?
Yeah, no.
Well, you're a very likable person yourself, so
Thank you.
you don't have that problem.
I get along very well with myself, I do.
Now, you always wanted to be in some form of entertainment, music?
Yes, I started writing songs when I was about 9 years old.
Really?
I remember I used to write parodies of popular songs. I was very fat as a kid, and I wrote songs like "No Can Eat, No Can Eat, I'm fat, I'm on a diet, so I no can eat." I would write a little parodies of strange songs like that.
Right.
And, yes, my father, he managed a small theater in Toronto. We lived above it, and I used to.
A movie theater?
Yes, a movie theater. The Royal Theater in the corner of Dundas and Dufferin. And I would, from the age of 2, go downstairs, crawl downstairs every night and watch a double bill, the same double bill for 3 nights in a row, running. Twice I'd watch it every night. And I grew with that. So to me, I still love movies. I can see 5 or 6 in a day if I get the opportunity. That's the real world to me. Everything else is kind of...
Like Frank Schuster. Did he ever tell you that? His father was a cameraman,
Oh, no, he didn't tell
an
that.
operator
Oh, was he? Oh,
in
yeah.
a movie theater.
No, he never
So
mentioned that.
Frank grew up
Really?
in those
Oh,
dark
that's
movie
interesting.
theaters watching
Well, that's what I
watching
did.
films.
That's what I do.
Right.
And I love it.
Right, that's
Yeah.
interesting. That's
Yeah.
if you hadn't decided to do what you're doing, is there any other profession that would have interested you?
Uh, well, two. Before I was in Toronto, I started taking piano lessons when I was, I don't know, again 9 or 10 years old, and indeed at that, I had a very fine teacher there. I'm sure she's passed on now, Mona Bates.
Oh, I know that name.
Yes, a very famous and a wonderful
Yes.
teacher, and she thought I could have been a concert pianist at that time. In fact, I didn't want to go to university. I really wanted to. And my mother said, "You've got to get that as a backing." My mother and my father just kind of insisted that I go, and somebody managed to talk me into it, and I did. And so that's one thing I did. And the other thing, I guess I could have made a career of philosophy. I would have been a lousy teacher, but I never did finish my thesis at Oxford, and it's on my list of things to do.
Of things to do, absolutely.
At the moment.
And
So I guess that's what I
check it off.
probably,
Yeah.
either of those, I might have, you know.
But you're happy with what you decided to do?
Oh yes, I'm very happy.
Well, then that's where you should be.
Yeah.
Exactly. What are you looking forward to now? What do you still want to do?
Well, as I said, musical theater. And
Yes.
I'm still writing. I'm writing another show at the moment. I'm busy, and I would like to get some of them produced somehow if I can. And that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Well, why don't you do one of those cooperative shows that we do, you know, the off-Broadway, off wherever the main stream is,
Yeah.
where the actors divide up any profits. We've done that
Oh, really?
in Canada.
Sounds like a good idea.
And have somebody come and see it.
Yeah.
You know, somebody who would be interested
yeah.
in promoting it, in doing
Sure.
it.
No, certainly. It's a good idea.
So if money, I mean, they work for nothing. The kids work for nothing.
Yeah.
So do you. And then the
It's
whatever comes in.
A workshop.
It's like a workshop, right?
position,
And you
yeah.
share
Sure. if
profits.
you're
There
independent.
have to be profits because
Yes.
nobody's getting paid.
Sure.
And use a minimal set,
Yeah. No, of course. Yeah.
but just to show it,
yeah, no,
just
it's
to
a good idea.
showcase it, and
Sure.
because you're so talented, you know, do what you love. You have
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm trying to do now.
Right, right. That would be beautiful. Tell me if you do it, I'll come and see it.
Okay. You are.
Okay. Do you have any hobbies, or are you too busy?
I love the Italian language, and I do now. We were supposed to make a trip at one point, my wife and I, with good friends of ours, with the Slades and Bernie Ornstein and his wife. Do you know Bernie?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Bernie Ornstein and another couple, Bernie Coppell, the actor, who was on Love Boat and everything. And we were all going to make an Italian trip, so I figured I'd learn a little bit of Italian before we went on the trip. Then I got involved in this show that was done in Toronto, this miniseries, this HBO miniseries, and I couldn't go. We couldn't go on the trip. But I started learning Italian. Anyways, I kept up doing it, and I just read books and then listen to some occasional tapes and things.
It's a beautiful language.
Yeah, and now I certainly can read. I can read novels and things in Italian and newspapers and things, and I can talk well enough so that if an Italian talks slowly to me, and not like he talks when he's talking to another Italian, I can understand and I can communicate with him. I've had a few conversations when we've visited Italy.
And they understand you?
Oh, yes.
How's your accent?
That's what they compliment me on, because I've always done accents very well. I've always, you know, since my watching since season, I can do all his accents, so I just use his accent and those words.
How would I say, I told him, Julie, don't go in Italian? That would have been funny.
Yes, Julie, non vai, Julie, non vai. Gliel'ho detto, non vai.
I'm going to learn that.
Oh, that was you, wasn't it? You did that.
Well, yes.
Of course it was you.
Yeah,
Yes, it was.
we did that on the
I
Sullivan
never
Show.
got to see that sketch because I was still in. It was done while I was still in England. It was done before I came back from England. I still always wanted to see the sketch.
That's my claim to fame.
Right. Yes.
I'm one of the answers on Trivial Pursuits. You know, what did she say or something like that? What advice do you have for young people just now, starting out in your field, or in any field of entertainment? You know, acting.
Yeah, it's
writing, directing.
It's tough. Yeah, it's very tough. Writers, it's a little bit easier because you can write a spec script for something and then hope that somebody sees it and appreciates it. And acting is tough. You just gotta keep, you just go to auditions. You just could knock on doors and keep auditioning. And again, the best advice is get lucky. That's about it.
Yes, I guess so.
Yeah.
You have to be at the right place
at the right time. Yeah.
What about training? Do you believe
in training?
In training.
Whatever works for you. I never had specifically any training in any of the fields that even directing I never had, which is the reason I became a director was I had written a screenplay, a spec screenplay, which again, it was a Canadian company, wanted to do, and they asked me on the telephone, you seem, because we were doing Taxi at the time, you seem to have the pulse of America, do you think you could direct? And I said, have you ever directed? And I said, sure.
Why not?
Why not? And I got a book. I mean, I knew, because as I dealt with actors, of course, as a producer, I dealt with actors. Then I just got this book on camera work, and we were doing, while we were doing Taxi, we were doing another show called Best of the West, and just to get my feet wet as a director, and my partner Ed was going to co-produce this movie when we got it on, so we said, do one of these, he said, and so I did a Best of, and the crew was terrific, because I just told them, I have no idea how to get what I want. I know what I want, you're going to have to get it for me. And they were all extremely helpful, and I got on well with the cast, of course. And so I ended up doing 2 of those, and then the next year I did a couple of Taxis, and then I started doing a lot. While I was writing the musicals, I was directing a number of shows for other people, including my ex-partner. And
well, when you direct, were you working with the actors, like the interpretation? What about movement?
Yes, of course you have to
everything.
You get to know. It becomes it's a skill.
Yes.
It's a skill staging for the camera. Knowing when you've got 3 or 4 cameras, you know what you're going to get.
Did you also call the shots?
Well, in film, most of the shows I did were film, so you don't have to. You have a camera coordinator, and I would make up my plans for what I wanted, and then he would write it down, and then he's calling shots.
Right.
But in tape, even in tape, where the director usually does call the shots, I didn't trust myself to do it, and I would have the assistant with who I would work out the shots with. I'd go over the shots, and he or she would call it from the booth. I would stay on the floor and just to be there for the actors if something went wrong, or to say keep going or whatever, and I'd be in contact with the booth. But no, I never called the shots. I never felt competent enough to switch cameras. Cameras, are you ready? Well, that wasn't for me.
Well, absolutely. You have to know where it would look best.
Yes. Well, that I knew. I knew exactly what I wanted in terms of angles. I knew I'd stage for that. I knew where I wanted the cameras. I knew what it should be, and I knew how I was going to cut it afterwards.
Right.
Yeah, but I didn't trust myself to.
Well, then, did you enjoy tape or film because you said you knew where you would cut it?
I enjoyed them both. There's a
Right.
lot of advantages to take. I mean, it's terrific when you're for the comedies that I know the ones that I've directed and that I've written, that I've seen, because you have that line cut. You know, you make a line cut as you
Yes.
produce, and that's shown to the audience. They have it on monitors, so they can laugh. They're closer to the action because you have these monitors. In
Right.
film, which we did, Mary and Taxi were both film shows, they're farther away from the action. Although it didn't seem to matter that much, we still had terrific audience reaction. But that it's still a big plus to have those monitors that they can see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Everything you've told me is so exciting. You know, it's a wonderful to do something that you enjoy doing
That's
so much.
nice. That is very
is
nice. Yeah.
The best of all worlds, I think, isn't it?
Yes. No
That's
question.
right. So you think kids who are starting out just have to be there, or just
Yeah, I mean, every senior person gets asked
Yes.
that question, of course.
I know that.
And there is nothing but you have to do what we did. You just keep plugging away.
keep working,
Keep
working,
at it.
and
hope
learn from watching both bad things and good things.
And good things. Yes, you watch what other people do,
Right.
of course.
Right,
Of course.
and know what you would do.
If you
Not
had the
superior, you know, I would do it better, but
differently.
don't do this because
Sure.
he's just made a fool of himself.
Yeah.
And this one isn't honest.
So,
He's listening to his voice. That sort of thing, I feel is very helpful.
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
See what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And Stan Daniels, you know, this has been such a joy for me.
Oh well, you're terrific at this.
It's gone by so.
You should give up acting and do this. You
Do
should
this,
put on
you know,
60
I almost
Minutes.
have. Just about.
Oh, you're terrific.
So,
You were wonderful. I
Thank
saw you
you.
in so many
Thank you
things.
so much. And I thank you for this hour.
Oh.
It's just been
Oh,
beautiful.
it's been fun for me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Sylvia Lennick for the Ben Lennick Archives.
That's a cut.